Welcome back to the Dog Sitting Podcast, everybody. We're going to talk about some one's ready stuff in this edition. What's up? You got me, you got Trent, you got Peaches, and you've got Carey Kight, one of my favorite people in the entire world, former Air Force Airman, digital content creator, producer, director, creator of all things. Carey, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me. Hope I can live up to that intro. I've also got both my dogs here. So this is, in fact, the dog
See,
sitting.
they're busy. They're busy doing stuff.
Yeah.
They're wrestling. This is a
Yeah, they're
dog-friendly
definitely busy.
space. Dog-friendly space this week. We're going to get into all your work with Veteran Made Pod, which I love. It's a new podcast. You're so hot, Veteran Made Pod right now. So we're definitely going to talk about that later in the thing. But take us all the way back to the beginning, man. Like, how did we meet? How did your path get you to where you are?
Yeah, for sure. So great to be with all three of you, Aaron. Great to be with you again, Trent and Peaches. Great to meet you officially for the first time. I'm stoked to be here. Really appreciate what y'all do for the Air Force community, the military community in general, and obviously for the AFSPEC war community specifically. Which I enlisted in the Air Force as a PJ or a PJ slot. And that's where I met Aaron at INDOC. I was sitting at the old dorms at Medina with my door open, just waiting to get smoked, and was sitting at the desk, and I heard from across the hall as somebody came barreling down, "What do you know about those Ohio State Buckeyes?" And I looked down and I'm like, "Oh, I've got my Ohio State shirt on." And I threw Aaron an OH. He gave me an IO back, and feel like we've been friends ever since. But yeah,
I was just waiting. I was like, "What? It's going to be Trent." I knew who it was going to be. I didn't know what it was going to be. So how dare you, in this time of healing for Ohio, the breadbasket of America? You give it a second, Trenton. You give it a second.
Well, shouts out to Nate Gladden too. That one was also for him.
Exactly.
He's been wearing that Hail sweatshirt and taking pictures and putting it on Instagram too much recently. But yeah, all joking aside, yeah, that's where Aaron and I met. I enlisted. I partly enlisted because patriotism, wanted to serve the country, wanted to give back. My grandfather was in the Civil Air Patrol. My uncle was in the Marine Corps. But military wasn't like a huge thing in the family, but service to community and service to family and country was certainly part of it. And so, I struggled a bit in high school, played football, was good enough to go play D2, D3, but ultimately you need better grades than I had to go to a small liberal arts college and get an academic scholarship. And so, dad and I had an agreement that if I earned half through, grants and scholarships, he would split the other half. I got about a third, and asked him if there was wiggle room, and he said absolutely not. And I said, great, I'm going to look at some other options. And so ultimately landed on enlisting in the Air Force. And kind of a funny story, I had the recruiter came to the school and kind of was going through his little pamphlet, and I wasn't really listening. And he got to a page where there was a commando with a rucksack and fatigues at the time, because I didn't know they were called BDUs, kind of lurking through the jungle, had face paint and all that shit on. And I stopped him. I said, "What is that?" He said, "That's Air Force Special Operations." I said, "Well, I would like to do that. That looks cool." And he goes, "Well, there's two. There's combat control and there's pararescue." And this was obviously at the time, back in 2006. And I said, "Which one's harder?" And he said, "Well, they call the pararescue pipeline Superman School." And I said, "Great, let's do that one." And he said, "Are you sure? Like, you don't want to hear the rest of the thing?" And I said, "No, let's do that." I was kind of in this mindset and headspace of like going to do something hard, going to challenge myself, and just kind of get out and go explore and go on an adventure and do something. And
I did the same thing, but that's where the Ohio comes in, because you're really looking for something else. After 18 years of exposure to Northeast Ohio, you're like, well, for me in Northeast Ohio, you're like, you know what I could do? Pretty much anything else. So of course you thought the wide open plains of San Antonio, Texas, and the pararescue pipeline. Of course you're like, no, that sounds great. This is going to suck in a different way. Oh, okay, tight.
Right. I was in Central Ohio, so I was in Northwest Columbus, and I'd actually split time growing up between San Diego and Columbus. And so that's what the next thing the recruiter said was, he goes, "Well, there's a swimming component to this, right?" And I said, no, I don't know anything. So just tell me what I need to know. And so he kind of went through the past test and, told me about the run and the swim and the push-ups and the pull-ups and the sit-ups. And I'm like, oh, I could do that. I, played 3 sports, basketball, football, and track. And he goes, what about the swimming? I was like, well, I actually grew up in San Diego too, kind of going back and forth with divorced parents, and played water polo and swam growing up. He's like, oh, okay, cool. So he scheduled the pass, and I passed it, was super stoked, and graduated from high school, and then spent the summer working at Steak and Shake at home, waiting tables, and just kind of getting ready to go whenever a slot opened up. And over the summer, a slot opened up in the fall. So I went in October to basic, went to basic. Another funny story. I got recycled in basic for not wearing underwear because I had to go back to issue 2, I think they call it, to get the blues. And I just needed a size up. And so I didn't have any underwear on. And so I got there and I just asked for a size up of the pants. And the woman was like, no, you have to try them on. I'm like, I can't do that. She said, why not? I told her why. And she goes, oh, you got to go back and talk to your TI. So I marched all the way back, got recycled. So that actually
that commando thing very literally, didn't you?
Right,
Wait,
exactly.
Oh God, Trent
shows you
Trent.
how little I knew. And so I actually, because I got recycled, I got to INDOC a little late, but also it was December. And so the next class, I don't know exactly how it worked, but I just remember there being basically like everybody was kind of going through with the recyclees and kind of going through a prep, getting ready for the next course to start in January. So I showed up and I was a week behind, everybody else that was supposed to show up for that class. And so kind of started off on the wrong foot, had to explain to everybody why I was late and why I got recycled. And so obviously not the best foundation to build on.
What a ridiculous thing.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious.
Just right away, you're just like, oh, okay, so I didn't wear underwear. And then you got to tell everybody and like transition into that story.
Yeah. And the first time, I'm like sitting on the mats at the old complex and we're sitting and can I say instructor names from back then?
I'm sure, I guess.
I don't think that we have many times.
Yeah. Sergeant Maroney, he was a civilian at the time, walks in and somebody said Team 10 Hut, and everybody sat up. But in my head, I'm like, well, you can't go to attention when you're sitting down. So I don't really know what to do. So I was like, Ricky Bobby, like, I don't know what to do with my hands. And he just walked by and goes, new guy, and then keeps it moving. And I'm like, shit. So I kind of started off with that really odd foundation, and went through the first class, got recycled for pull-ups, and then kind of as I was working with the other recyclees, kind of waiting, that's when Aaron showed up and was actually instrumental in helping me through the pull-ups portion, which was really difficult because I'd done a lot of sports growing up, but none of which required pull-ups. And so I was good at the sit-ups, good at the push-ups, good at everything else, but my long ass monkey arms and I wasn't ready for that. And so Aaron was my element leader and was a great friend and a great leader and helped me through getting to graduation. I did not get through graduation. I passed everything at the end of the course except for the run. I failed it by 6 seconds, which was brutal. And then later that weekend, I got in a car accident and hurt my knee and got to this was off base and got back and was told that I wasn't going to be able to stay in the pipeline and that I was going to have to go do something else in the Air Force and then if I wanted to come back and cross train, that I could. And I actually was really excited at that opportunity because I know Aaron had done the same thing and had been through INDOC a couple of times, and so I kind of had that thought and feeling that, all right, this is like I can make that work. And so I went through, had a surgery, had stitches, like had all that stuff, had everything taken out, and then was basically told that the knee would not really hold up, and so I wasn't going to probably be able to ever come back and cross train.
Man, 6 seconds. Hey, yeah. I've been there. I failed my final. The first eval test or whatever at the final week by 2 seconds. Yeah, that's a sting.
So what did you do kind of in the face of that? Because I went through it with you in real time, right? Like we talked about this when it happened and we've talked about it since, but we get a lot of questions like sometimes bad things happen to good people. Sometimes you can make it through selection and not get picked up. Like we talk to a lot of people that go through, well, not a lot of people, but we talk to people that'll go, hey, I made it through A&S, but I was a non-select. Like, what do I do? You're like, well, if you want to come back, you just go start getting back into life and refocusing yourself and getting going. So what are some things you did at the time to get past, that initial disappointment? Because it was a disappointment. Like I'll speak freely for you. Like that one sucked for you and it was close. And then the follow on kind of like double blow of, the knee not holding up after the stress you put it through, like kind of close that door. So what did you do in that moment to move on?
Yeah. In the moment, I literally just put one foot in front of the other. I was angry. I was scared. I was embarrassed. I don't, kind of a lot of shame around both the failure of the run and then just the what felt like a failure of like getting into a car accident. You know what I mean? Which obviously wasn't my fault. But I still kind of felt the same feelings of shame, and it was a double whammy. And so I just put one foot in front of the other and was like, how do I just to kind of take this thing one day at a time and really figure out what's next. And so I think I put a list together of jobs, and the job I ended up getting was 2W1 armament systems specialist, load towed as we're called, and to go to Shepherd. And I mean, on the surface, it looks like a cool job. Loading bombs on fighter jets seems pretty dope, and it is, can confirm. But the thing I really struggled with was the mindset around why I was serving and what I was going to be doing. And I've since processed it, and I think it's probably valuable to talk about here. I was very judgmental of the conventional side of the military and did not want to be a part of it. And looking back, not to get too woo-woo, I do think that is the lesson that I was supposed to learn, that all service matters and that service matters where you're serving. And at the end of the day, everybody in the Air Force has a job to do. And so I'm very close with my dad, and I just talked to him every day. And I was very vulnerable and honest with him about what I was feeling and thinking. And he just kept repeating, that refrain to me, that like service matters, every job matters. I told him about the one team, one fight and kind of all that. And it sounds cheesy, but it's cheesy for a reason. It's because it's true. And so he just really helped me kind of talk through, each day, each week as I left for Shepherd and went to Shepherd and went through my new tech school. And I eventually came out of that tech school with, not the best grades, although they weren't bad, but I got what they call the Weapons Warrior Award, which is the person that the instructor would most want to have on their crew, which meant a great deal to me because at the beginning I didn't even want to be on a weapons crew.
Yeah. Real quick, how old were you when all this happened?
I mean, I graduated 18, so 18 in 2006, 2007, 19. Yeah, right. 19 years old.
I couldn't remember if you had done a little bit of college or not, but because I know you kind of talked about grants, but like that's a big lesson to learn at the age of 18, and that's early on, which is good. You experience that failure. But then like you nailed it, because that is something that like people need purpose. And a lot of times when you get in that grind, especially, if you're a weapons loader, you're maintenance, your services, working in the mortuary, whatever it is, right? Sometimes you can find yourself a bit discouraged. You're like, what's my purpose? Like, what the hell's the point of even doing this? Right. And to get a chance to, see and understand the bigger picture and what you're supporting, because this is not for you guys, but for the viewers, like there is an idea or it may even be a doctrinal term. It is a doctrinal term: supported versus supporting, right? So everybody at some point, everybody is in a supporting role, ing, right? Sometimes you are the supported, meaning you are the mission. Everybody there, all the aircraft, all the people on the ground is there to support you. For example, if you happen to be a pilot that ejected over combat or over enemy lines, right? Like everybody is there to support you. You are the supported, and we are in a supporting role. So, as a weapons loader, most of the time you are in a supporting role, and you never get to see the end result of that. You load some bombs on some hogs, they go out, they come back empty. Like, that's a great day for you, right? You
Winchester, baby.
Oh yeah. Like, these guys went and they got some, right? But you never actually get to see the boom at the end. So that is a tough lesson, but a good lesson to learn early on. I don't know, anything on that? Absolutely not. Nothing on that. Got it.
I think, I don't know. Trent looked like he was going to say something. Now he looks like
I know. I thought so
I'm
too.
I'm sorry. I'm always like thinking, and then Aaron is so judgmental that I'm always like, maybe I shouldn't say anything. But
why am I catching heat? I didn't even do anything. I was the only one.
You're from Ohio.
I was chilling. How dare's two of us? 50% of the podcast is from Ohio. All right, sorry.
But I think, especially when we're younger, we have what we do is we attach our identity to something that's external, right? Like, we don't see like our service for what it is. We don't see like our ability and how we fit into that big picture. So when you've already attached your identity to something else, like when I joined, I joined as a linguist, and I'd already attached all my identity to that. Like, I'm going to be a linguist. I'd already told everybody. And then when they told me I couldn't do that, it's embarrassing and all these other things. You have to like rip that away, and it's more painful than it should be. But instead of viewing yourself as like a cog in the machine and like your service is valuable, like we attach our identities to things or whatever. So like, I think it's hard to see as like an airman or a younger person how you fit into that bigger picture, and knowing who you are and having your own standalone identity versus your job and all those other things. And I think it's tough to go through those transitions, before you can see everything as an older person like Aaron. Aaron's super old.
For sure. I mean, I remember a handful of things off of that. I mean, the supported versus supporting is something that actually gets talked about with maintainers a lot, and specifically with weapons loaders, because when we deployed, it was like, we are doing this job for the infantrymen in those mountains. That's what we're doing this job for. And so that was continuously reminded, because that you have to attach yourself to some sort of end result, or you are just a cog in a machine. You are just driving a jammer and putting a JDAM on the bottom of an F-15. But why are you doing that? And you have to link from, end result back. And Aaron and I were, I know that Aaron has a very contentious relationship with Facebook, but one of the times that he had Facebook, he and I were both deployed at the same time to a similar location. And I remember just messaging him and being like, "Hey man, I hope one of my bombs can help you." And he hit me back with, "Hell yeah." And I just remember thinking like, all right, cool. Like a little bit of a full circle moment here where I'm like, all right, cool. I'm still connected to somebody from INDOC that I had a good relationship with, and I don't feel as much shame about not operating with him. And I'm able to kind of make that connection. And so I think finding those connections is really important. And then understanding that your identity is not placed within or onto those connections. They're just connections. Your identity is personal, not professional. Like, professional is what you do. It is not who you are. And there's shitbags in every single AFSC. Oh, yeah. We all know that. But you have to kind of remind yourself of that sometimes. And it's not just a difficult lesson, it's an ongoing lesson.
Yeah. You nailed it. And I think as the JTAC or whatever on the ground, the guy on the ground, we oftentimes, and I think it's a maturity level and experience level associated with it, but oftentimes we have a hard time understanding that, like, yeah, it's all about me. Nobody else is doing shit. They're just back there at the fob, just hanging out, not realizing like, hey, you were able to do everything that you were doing because all of those good folks back there are doing what they're doing. Like, and you oftentimes miss that. And it takes some time to understand that. So I remember kind of my aha moment was at Airman Leadership School, and I was there with some maintainers, and they had the same issue trying to connect, like, why am I even doing this? And they had never met somebody like a JTAC who was on the ground, who was, relying on that stuff. And they said it motivated the hell out of them, because whenever they'd get a scram call, and it's like, boom, boom, everything's moving. They could never connect like okay, yeah, we're scrambling, but he's like, man, we move so much faster now, knowing that like I'm able to connect with somebody who relies on us. So, then moved on to be an expediter and all that kind of stuff. So it helped them out a lot.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So how long did you end up staying in then?
I just did 4 years. I did from 2006 to 2010. So I was I did basically a year in Texas between Lackland, Medina, and Shepherd, and then 3 years at RAF Lakenheath, at the 494th Fighter Squadron. Yeah.
It's a great place, the UK, isn't it?
Oh man, I got so lucky. So lucky. Yeah. I deployed twice to Bagram with the 494th, and then we did some NATO training in Sweden, Belgium, and Romania. Did a couple of different exercises around there. Did the tactical leadership program in Belgium, which was really cool to work with other allied air forces and like smaller crews of maintainers from the other air forces. And like, it was mostly fun, and the pilots were flying some sorties here and there, but kind of like mostly a relationship building exercise. And so kind of getting those opportunities to serve in USAFE was obviously great, because you're not, stuck in Boise or stuck in Seymour Johnson or somewhere else. But also beneficial, because you kind of get to see and understand like how the Air Force, how the military really does fit and operate on the world stage. Because you just hear about that all the time. And then to actually kind of be there and work with other allied air forces and go to these bases and have those opportunities, it was really great.
No, absolutely. It gives you perspective. You get to experience and understand and appreciate other cultures, because as close as the Brits and the Aussies are to, us, there are still a lot of differences. Being married to an English woman, there are differences, right?
Yeah.
There are good and bad.
Yep.
And she would definitely say the same about me.
For sure.
Probably more bad than good. But that's my own issues. So were you making digital content at that point? Like, had that always interested you, or were you just kind of like, I mean, let me rephrase that. Did you always just want to do 4 years in the Air Force because you wanted to use it kind of as a stepping stone?
Yeah, so weirdly, I did. I guess not weirdly, but looking back, it's kind of odd to be like, yeah, I'm gonna enlist and do a job that has a 2-year pipeline, and then just spend 2 years doing it and get out like that. It's kind of strange looking back. But yes, I mean, I grew up wanting to be an actor. I loved movies. In high school, got into screenwriting and actually reading screenplays, watching the behind the scenes commentaries on DVDs, and kind of watching the making of documentaries and things like that. Really understanding how films worked. And part of what I wanted to study, if I was going to go to one of those, smaller colleges and play football, was creative writing, and kind of move towards that screenwriting, writing, directing, kind of like indie film, like every good film school student, I wanted to be the next Tarantino. So, that was
fantastic.
Kind of the immature version of it. But no, I wasn't creating any content. And that's actually one of the cool things that I've learned now, hosting my podcast and talking to other people that are still in. Like, it's just great that people are able to do that now, with the advent of social media and all the content creating platforms and opportunities that weren't really there. I mean, I had Facebook and MySpace, and that was kind of pretty much it. And so for me, it was like film or nothing. And not because I had any disrespect for other kinds of content. I just didn't really know that those existed yet. I think YouTube probably existed, but not in the way that it does now. It was still mostly, it was pretty early. So the
cat videos,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Nyan Cat,
E-Bombs World.
E-Bombs World.
Yeah.
College Humor and E-Bombs World got me through so many days of work, because they also didn't know how to set a firewall back then. So you could get onto E-Bomb. Like, the day that they figured out E-Bomb and College Humor behind the firewall was a sad day around military computer systems.
Brutal. So I wasn't creating content, but I was thinking about what I was going to do, and I was writing, journaling and writing, like essay writing and that kind of thing, because writing was still kind of the goal. And so I got out in 2010, went back to Columbus, waited tables for about a year, applied to Ohio State, got into Ohio State, and did 1 year there. Had a weird experience as a military student, because I mean, all military students have that experience where you're 22, 23 and everybody else is 18, 19. So there's that kind of maturity gap. There's the, more importantly than the maturity gap, there's just the experience gap. And not that like I have more experience and I'm better, but just I can't relate. Like you're going through things that I've already gone through, but went through in a different environment. I'm going through things that you're not going to go through probably, because you're not going to enlist at 18, right? So it's like this just weird kind of disconnect. And so I did really well in some classes, did really poorly in some other classes, and kind of realized that the big college thing wasn't really for me. And if I really wanted to go focus on screenwriting, I needed to go find somewhere that I could really do that. And oddly enough, that school in Ann Arbor has one of the best screenwriting programs in the country. So I did not apply because I knew that if I got in, I probably would have went. And so I looked for some other
That's
schools.
dedication right there. You're willing to partially derail your life just because you hate that team up north so bad.
Exactly. And so I found a couple of other smaller schools, one of which was Full Sail University in Orlando, Florida. And it was kind of like Phoenix or DeVry, but more for the arts and entertainment. So you still got a bachelor's degree, you get a fine arts degree, but it's accelerated. And yellow ribbon takes the GI Bill and all that stuff. So I packed up, left Columbus, went down to Orlando, and did a 4-year degree in about 2.5 years. One class 1 month, 2 classes the next month, and the classes were very small, and so I was able to kind of provide some mentorship on the writing side to some of my younger counterparts in the class. And the cool thing is I was really able to connect with my professors, and so because they're teaching you the craft. They're teaching you how to write a blueprint for a film, how to write a screenplay, how to research, how to build a world. And then they're teaching you, you're doing a deep dive into all of the genres. And then there's comic book writing and video game writing. And it's a whole kind of creative writing for multimedia degree. And so you get all this hyper focus, and then you're able to just build this really great relationship with people who've been there and who have done it and who were doing it while they're still teaching. And so that was a terrific experience for me. I always say that if a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or uncle says, "Hey, do you think Full Sail's right for my kid?" I always hesitate to say yes, because it was great for me, but that's because I was older. I had a car, I had a job, I had my own apartment, and I was, really relating with the professors and writing about things that I, was able to, I had a perspective. I wasn't just writing, Marvel fan fiction or whatever it might be. So it, for me, Full Sail was great. For younger students, I can't say. And then from there, I went straight to LA after I graduated to kind of get started on the Hollywood side of things.
Jeez. Well, I want to know where did the original inspiration come from? Like what got you into this? Who were the first, what were the first movies or books or comic books or whatever that got you interested in this? And then also, did you have to hide all of this nerddom as you were going through INDOC, or was it fully accepted by everybody?
Fantastic question.
I never got made fun of at all in INDOC for any of this stuff. And my whole military career, like everybody was the most supportive people of the career that I've tried to build have been everybody that I've served with, which is really cool. But no, I didn't. Sorry, I don't have any juicy details there. But I did not get made fun of. I had a good experience on that front.
Well, one of the reasons I ask is we get a lot of people being like, "Oh, well, like I'm this type of person. Like, should I join Aspect War and all these other things?" And it's like we try to tell people like it's all types of people. And honestly, as long as you're like a performer and a decent human, like it's a really accepting community. It sounds weird to say, maybe for people from the outside, but I said it kind of sarcastically, but that's why.
Yeah, I mean, not on the like personal interest front, but I do remember going through when I was going through, and because I was a sprinter in high school and played football. Ran the 1-2 and the 400, and so I never really ran distance if I didn't have to. And so I remember kind of getting through a portion of INDOC and struggle. Obviously, I ended up failing the run by 6 seconds, right? So it's like makes sense. I was kind of struggling with some of the long distance, and I remember, I think it was Doc, who was the big running coach there at the time. And I remember having a conversation with him and really telling him that I was struggling, and he was like, "Listen," he goes, "we need all kinds of people with different physical abilities on a team on the battlefield. So if you're a sprinter, that will be used to affect. And then, you do need to learn how to run longer distances because you have to, pass and, all of that stuff. But there's different kinds of people are needed on a team. And that's what makes up a team, is a bunch of different people doing different things, because not one person can do every one thing." So, kind of related, not about nerddom, but that idea is a true one. Inspirations for this. I mean, I'm a huge, so from a comic book standpoint, I read all the Batman comics and graphic novels, all the ones that the Christopher Nolan movies got based on, and then all these new movies got based on. Just kind of loved all of those. Frank Miller on the comic book side for Batman and Daredevil. And my dad was big into still is big into high fantasy sword and sorcery type novels, like wizards and dragons and shit. And so there was this, I read Harry Potter. Obviously I was the same age as the kids in those books. So every year the book would come out, and I actually read the 7th book of Harry Potter while I was waiting to go to Shepherd after all the INDOC failures, which was a I guess pretty cathartic experience now that I think about it. And then there was another series that my dad introduced me to that I basically have read every 18 months since I was 10. And it's called, the author's name, he's since passed away, is David Eddings. And there was 2 series, one called the Belgariad and one called the Malloreon. And it was this just kind of sword and sorcery epic, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings style thing. I read those books too, Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, all the classics on that side of things. And then on the film side, I really got into Tarantino, like every kid did, the Boondock Saints. I got into those. I was really kind of found my way through the Guy Ritchie, sort of independent film, but with some edge that was really what I was interested in. And yeah, so those were my influences, at least at that time.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think everyone can relate to something that they go back to over and over again that kind of connects them to where it all started.
Yeah.
So you're an Ohio kid. You went to Florida, which is really not that big of a departure from Ohio.
Right.
And then you go to LA.
Yep.
That's a departure. What had you learned up to this point in your life that made you able to survive in the Hollywood, ecosphere of crazy?
Well, the biggest thing that I had learned was that all I needed to do was get in and then get out. I just needed to go do my time, learn what I needed to learn, meet who I needed to meet, and then I could get out and go somewhere else. At that time, I was starting to have an understanding that there were hubs for filmmaking and for content creation outside of just Los Angeles. There was Los Angeles, there was New York, there was Chicago, Atlanta, New Orleans, Austin, right? There's all these different pockets. And LA always definitely felt like the foundation that I needed to have. I grew up splitting time between Ohio and Southern California and San Diego. So I'd spent some time in LA. We had some family friends up there, and somebody I was actually able to crash on in his guest room for the first 6 months that I was out there. And so I went out there with an understanding that I wasn't going to stay forever. And that I wasn't going to really stay that long, but I just wanted to go get that experience. And so I kind of started to use a deployment mindset. And I've actually kind of since used the kind of deployment and TDY model for different projects and different, kind of workflows in my professional life post military. And, so I went straight there, and the first thing I did was just apply for a bunch of jobs on the production equivalent of Craigslist. I don't even think it exists now, but it was called Mandy.com at the time. And I went and put just hundreds of different applications for, low paid, no paid, unpaid, whatever I could get. I just wanted to get the experience. And I ultimately landed with this web series that was getting produced. And they responded to my email and said, "Hey, would love to meet you." And I thought I was going to go meet some cool older producers, and I ended up meeting a couple of dudes my age. And I'm like, "Wait, how did you pull this off?"
Who's letting you do this? I want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So we hit it off, and they were super cool. They were like, "Hey, we love that you have the entertainment, the academic background of this, that you're interested in this, but more than anything, we're interested in your military experience because, that's unique and different and not something you see all the time. And, would love for you to come help us out." So I said, "That's great." They said, "It's unpaid." I said, "No problem." And so they put me in a department that was the assistant director department. And there's 3 levels of assistant directors. There's a second assistant director, a second assistant director, and a first assistant director. They all have different roles and responsibilities. The first assistant director runs the set, works directly with the director, making sure that everything runs on time, everything runs smoothly, every shot gets executed, that everything gets captured on the sound standpoint, and just make sure that, what we call making a day, right? Making the day. So you have 10 hours, don't go into overtime, all that good stuff. The second assistant director is in charge of the cast, and making sure that they're ferried back and forth between wardrobe and hair and makeup, and making sure that the first assistant director is supported. The second assistant director is just a supporting role for those other two. And then there would be like a production assistant, a PA role. So that's where they put me. So I was like, oh, this is cool. So the one guy gave me a book, and he's like, here's a book about this department and kind of like how it works. And so and that's where I learned everything I just said. And so I went home and I read it. I'm like, that's cool. So we had 3 days of prep for this web series, and then we were going to shoot for 15 days. I showed up on the first day, the second quit. I showed up on the second day, the second quit. I showed up on the third day, the day before shooting, the first quit. So this one of these producers looks at me and he goes, hey man, do you think you can do this by yourself? And I was like, well, I've read this book cover to cover, and I've been here for the last 3 days, and you don't have any money, so it sounds great. Yeah, I think I can figure it out.
I can just step right up. I've done this a million times. No clue what's going on. I need to do what? All right, no, I'll just be the lead now. Okay, tight. Right.
So what I noticed on those 3 days, though, as I was prepping for this with these guys, is that the unit production manager, who's kind of like the workhorse of the producers, not the like financier, not the fancy person, but the person who's actually producing the project. And then that person is like the maintenance officer. The first AD is like the pro super. And then every other department head is like the expediter. So I started to see the flight line, and I was like, oh, so and I never expedited. I got out as a senior airman, but I still obviously worked with expediters and pro supers and all this. So as I was prepping, I looked and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I just need to be the pro super. I just need to talk to the expediters for each department, and then I need to just channel up to the maintenance officer just to make sure that everything flows. But once I started to think about it in that framework, I just banged it out, and it was great. And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm a first AD now. Like I can go apply for other jobs, and I can do this because I did it successfully, for 15 days for no money. And they hired me to do another job with that crew. And I went to Illinois, and I did the same thing for an ultra low budget horror movie that's terrible. But it was super fun to make. And I learned a lot about like how to produce a movie from working with those guys, and doing a little bit more in-depth work on the scheduling side of things, and just like really understanding how the relationship between a screenwriter and a director and the producers and the production manager and the first AD, and just like the cast and how everything gets made. So I really just started to look at things through that framework that I was familiar with, and it helped me execute.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. The whole being unpaid, the success through attrition. Where did you get that mindset where like you're like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, both on the learning side, and also I'm sure there were some long days where everybody's looking at you. You're the only person probably that seemed organized on some days because you put it into that like flight line thing. Mm-hmm. Like, how did you get through all that with no pay and still keep track of that goal? Because obviously those other dudes had similar goals to you as yours, but like one day in, they're like, I can't do this anymore. What was different about you that allowed you to push through all that stuff and to see your way to success?
I'm very naturally a patient person. I talk about this, my wife and I talk about this all the time, because we counterbalance each other well on that front. I'm very naturally patient. And so I just started engaging in a very long view of what I wanted my career to be. And I'm not in a hurry. There's no reason for me to be in a hurry, because I will eventually get that thing that I want to have. And it's going to take as long as it's going to take, and it's going to take what it takes. And I think going through INDOC, making it all the way to the end, I had some sort of understanding of what I'm capable of in general. I think going through that failure was, as disheartening as it was like really good prep for not much is going to feel worse than that. And then going through the transition of making my way into the conventional Air Force, serving with pride, and going through that whole process, like that's just a really strong foundation for a life. And so that's going to be what I build this on, and I'm just going to engage in these frameworks as long as they take, and do whatever it takes in order to take the next step, get to the next phase, and do the things that I need to do in order to make the things that I want to make and have the career that I want to have. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. I feel good about it.
Nice. I feel really good about it. So when you were in LA, man, like were there times where you're just like a breath away? You're like, listen, if I don't get a paycheck this next week, I'm going home. Like I'm sure there had to be those times where you were not necessarily the most motivated to keep going.
Yes. So I took two short screenplays that I'd written in college with me out there. And so when I was doing these unpaid jobs, where I was working for other people, in between those, I would get those crews together and those casts together. And then we would go make the things that I wanted to make and make the screenplays that I had taken out there. So the whole time I was in LA, I was working for other people, but then I was also working on the side with my own material and doing the thing that I said that I wanted to do out there, and working with other people. That we were in the trenches together on these other jobs. So at that point, the only real toll wasn't emotional, and it wasn't from like a work ethic standpoint or from a fatigue standpoint. At that point, the only toll was financial, because I was putting these films on credit cards, and I was waiting tables and tending bar. I waited a little too long being in LA before I started waiting tables and tending bars. So I was kind of working from debt.
Sure.
I was like, oh, let me go out there. I've got a nest egg, and that just goes like that. So,
Nice. Yeah.
but no, I never wanted to quit. I never wanted to stop. It was all just kind of like, all right, how do I trudge through this? And, how do I counterbalance the things I'm doing for other people, and the lessons I'm learning, and the skills that I'm developing through them? How do I kind of use that on the side for the things that I'm trying to do to build a career, with my personal passion projects? So that's how I got through that aspect of it.
Definitely. And then what led the move to NYC? So you just relocated recently from there. So when did you move out to New York? Because now you got like the storybook, rags to riches, Ohio
Right.
guy, hits the military up and he makes it as a film guy. Now you're living in New York City. So what actually drove the move out to New York?
So I reconnected with my now wife, who was where she and I had gone to high school together. We met each other freshman year of high school, and she and I kind of dated off and on through the military while she was in college. Excuse me. And then while I was in college and she was in New York, she moved to New York City right after grad school. And so after we had wrapped up the second short film that I made out there, the co-producer and star of that film, also a Midwestern guy, is from Detroit. He's a Sparty fan though. He and I were just kind of like lamenting how difficult it was to date in LA, and just how really terrible that whole scene was. And so he's like, hey man, you keep bringing up this chick Andrea every time we have this conversation. Like, what's the deal? And so I told him the whole story, like how we met, and that's would be another podcast. So I'm not going to go into it, but like there's a long story of dating several times before we finally made it work. And after this conversation I had with him, I texted her, and I just I did the whole classic like, hey, and then she texted me back, hey, and then we started talking. And
a modern love story. Hey,
yeah, exactly.
What up?
What up? WYD. So she was in education at the time as a teacher. Her spring break was coming up. This was like March or something like that, April. And so we she came out to visit, and we were like, hey, like this either is going to work or we're never talking to each other again, right? Like we can't do this like a seventh time. And so we was like talking about New York, and she was like, oh, I'm really happy that you've pursued your dream successfully and are actually in the industry working. She's like, I've got some friends that work in production back in New York. I'd love to connect you. I'm like, okay, cool. So she connects me to this guy who's a producer at Time Inc. Studios, which is like Sports Illustrated. It's all been since sold off, but it was like Sports Illustrated, Entertainment Weekly, People Magazine, like all that kind of thing. And he produced branded content. And so he, because Andrea had connected me to him, he reached out to me. He said, hey, I've got a project coming up in LA. I need a producer and a director to put a small crew together and to shoot this thing for the Disney Channel. And I was like, oh, obviously I would love to do that. And so we connected. I got the gig. As we were talking, he's like, oh, hey, by the way, what's your day rate? And I said, excuse me? He's like, your day rate, like, what do you charge daily? And I was like, listen, Don, I work for free right now, so I know I need to have an answer to this question, but I don't.
If you could just give me a quick Google, my dude, let me just Google some market prices.
Yeah, that's right. And so he goes, okay, tell you what, he goes, $500 a day for 2 days of work. He goes, just so you know, that's a little bit on the low end. He's like, so I'm making a little extra money on this one. He's like, but you got to learn that lesson. And he goes, as we start to do more of these together, like I can help you figure that out. I said, great, dude. $1,000 for me, waiting tables, tending bar. That means I can let go of some shifts. I'm super happy. And I'm also super happy that I'm going to, scale and start to learn how this thing works. So I did that one job with him. We had rap beers after. And he's like, dude, he's like, if you want to make indie films, that's awesome. He goes, but stop waiting tables and tending bar. He's like, start working in advertising and doing this as your job. And then you can make the other content that you want to make on the side with better quality, because you'll have access to people that do it every day. And then you'll have more cash in your pocket and you'll be able to build a career. I'm like, man, that's really smart. Something Full Sail never taught. They never taught that there's this like integrated advertising production side of things, that there's copywriting, that there's like, I know what commercials are because I've watched them my whole life, but I never like really knew that was a part of the same industry, weirdly. So when he made that connection, I was like, oh, okay. And so then I decided to move to New York to be with Andrea and go work where I now know there's somebody who can hire me more than just one time. And so I moved to New York, moved in with her, and then I just went and hung out at this dude's office weekly, like every few days. I would just go down, grab a coffee, go sit in, say hello, knock on doors, ask if they had anything that they needed me to do. And that would always kind of lead to some small jobs here and there. So I was still waiting tables and tending bar, but then they were hiring me to write some scripts and do some copywriting, and they would hire me to write decks, and they would hire me to be a first assistant director. They would hire me to be a director on some smaller shoots. They would let me produce some shoots. And I just kind of started to put a little portfolio together, working as a freelancer, and then continuing to wait tables and tend bar, and made a couple of more short films in New York City as well, and kind of building the indie film side of that concurrently, and then kind of started to scale from there.
Nice. Just grinding.
I know that's what it is. Just a ridiculous ticketing work ethic, baby. Let's go. Yeah. So did you have any big breakthroughs on the indie side of it? So did you have anything in New York that really popped off or was well received, or one that you felt really proud of?
Yeah. So we made a short film called An Actor Prepares. I was working at a restaurant with a married couple, and they were both actors, and they had this like kind of crazy chemistry. And I'm like, I want to make something with y'all. Let me write a script. Like, let me figure something out. And so Andrea and I were moving out of an apartment. And so we had like a week before we were in our new apartment, and then like a week with all of our shit was out of our old apartment. And the super used that opportunity to come in and do a quick demo and remodel on some stuff. And so I went over there one day and just looked, and it was like the perfect set for something like horror-y, something scary, something, whatever. And so I was like, oh, so I was like writing, tried to come up with an idea. And I came up with this idea for a horror film set in an empty apartment that was under construction. Hired these two and another actor. That was Andrea's first gig, helping me out co-producing something. And so we made that, we cut it together. I'd like pulled crew from, everybody worked for free. And I spent money on it, right? So I didn't feel bad because it wasn't like I was making money and other people weren't. But I pulled crew from advertising jobs. I'm like, listen, you never get the opportunity to do something cool and artsy. You're always working for the man trying to sell a product. Like, do you want to come spend one day for pizza and beer making something cool? And people were like, hell yeah, let's do it. So got some crew together. We shot it in one day, cut it together. And that one did really well in the horror film festival circuit, and played some pretty big festivals, which was a lot of fun. And, it was kind of one of those that I still watch it every year or so. I like watching it again. I'm like, yeah, it still actually holds up. Like, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, taking a step back a little bit, like I think it's like you are a perfect example that it takes all kinds of folks to make the world go round, in terms of, everybody, I don't say everybody, maybe me, at least when I was younger, I had this vision of what military members are like and that kind of stuff. And in reality, everybody's into their own kind of thing, right? I was telling my commander now, like, cause he was just asking me about being Air Force Special Warfare and stuff like that. And I was like, honestly, man, I'm probably pretty boring. Most people would actually think I'm pretty boring, but I think everybody, I'm not big into comic books or anything like that, but other people are, and they're out there writing. And I think that's where folks like, you, Jack Carr, that kind of stuff, like folks like that are able to create content. Like I rely on Trent and Aaron for this. I'm just here. Right. But I mean,
terrifying.
But you with that kind of interest, that kind of work ethic, that grind, just kind of helps you out, and that kind of transitions us into like veteran made podcast.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, dude, you started that up. Like, what made you want to start that up? And then, I mean, look where you're at now.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, so I stopped freelancing with that group and got hired on a quarterly contractual basis with another small agency production company, basically a production agency, where I produced NASCAR campaigns for like 3 years, and we did some Fox Sports work. We did some Anheuser-Busch work. We actually built Anheuser-Busch's internal digital studio. And so I was kind of like the first producer over there, produced like a regional Super Bowl spot, nothing crazy, but still a Super Bowl spot, which was really cool. And just kind of like started to see the inner workings of how you actually build the infrastructure of a department and how you build the infrastructure of an agency. And the guy that I was working for who was the executive producer, still a good buddy of mine. I pulled him aside one day and I said, hey man, I would really like to have your position someday. Not the one here, because I'm not trying to steal your position, but I want to have a position like yours somewhere else one day, and can you mentor me along the way? And he's like, absolutely. And so he was kind of helping me and mentoring me and doing these things. And the people that he worked for, the principals at this advertising agency, I took one of them out for like a happy hour drinks and told him the same thing. I said, hey, I've been working with this other guy, and I really want to have a role like his. Like, do you have any feedback for me? What do you think? And he looked at me and he was like, listen, man, my observation of you is that you're really, really good at the things that you do at the level that you do them. He's like, you were in the military, so being a first AD makes sense. Being a line producer makes sense. But like, scaling and building a department and thinking more creatively and thinking, he's like, I just don't think that that's really what you're set up to do. So I think you should just stick with what you're doing. And I was devastated. That's just, first of all, it's brutal if it's true, right? So it's brutal either way. Because if he's right, then like, fuck, And then if he's wrong, then fuck you, But I have to figure out like which one of those two paths I'm going to take. Chose the second one. So I non-renewed my contract with them / they non-renewed it with me, right? It was mutual. And then I went freelance for a little bit, and then I landed at another advertising agency that I'm at now. And this was at the very beginning of COVID. We scaled a sub-brand at Gillette called King C Gillette, which was a at-home beard care brand for men, which is the perfect thing to launch during a pandemic when everybody has to be on Zoom and Microsoft Teams instead of going, into the office, so they can't go to the barber. So we just kind of started rolling all this content out, and I was, permalancing with them, kind of permanently freelancing with them. And about 2 months into it, the principals at this agency said the exact opposite thing that other guy said. And they're like, we love what you're doing. We love what you bring. We love the mindset. We love that you bring this kind of military framework without being militant. The chief operations officer was running production. He's like, I don't want to do production anymore, dude. He's like, I just want to do operations. Do you want the job? And I said, yes. Obviously.
Yeah. If you could, that'd be great.
Yeah. And so because I was technically unqualified for it, but I had performed in a way that gave me an opportunity that I otherwise, wouldn't get anywhere else. I took a step back and I pressed pause and I was like, whoa, there is something here for other veterans in my position. Over the course of the last 10 years of me transitioning out, I somehow Scooby-Dooed my way into this position. I need to reverse engineer this, and I need to figure out how to equip people with tools to help them do what I did unintentionally, right? Like I didn't do any of this intentionally. I just worked my ass off. And then now I'm doing the intentional work to go back. And so there was a SEAL working for my dad, and I had a couple of other buddies that were kind of in the space who were willing to get on a Zoom and record a podcast. And so I just started grinding again with different guests who had different skill sets, who were doing different things that wasn't logistics, supply, security, contracting. By the way, those things are amazing, and those things we need to keep the world moving. But there's also a bomb loader who wants to make movies out there. So how do I go find that guy or gal? And so I just started having these conversations and really trying to use it as a repository of content, anecdotes, and a skill building exercise, both for myself and for the audience, to really look at different ways that you can transition out of the military, and different ways that you can go pursue the things that you want to pursue that maybe the people in your life are telling you can't. And maybe you can't, but there's only one way to find out, and that's to do it. And the only way you're going to do it is if you have support along the way. And so that's what I try to provide.
And so I'm curious then, just because, I hear, I've been doing this for, I don't know, 24 years, something like that, or coming up on it. Right. And I've had a handful of jobs, like in the grand scheme of things, with that amount of time, I've had a handful of jobs that are still relatively, the same. Whereas you have been all over the place. Do you, as somebody who is starting to look, into the future, do you think that hitting all those different things helped you? Or do you think that maybe okay. All right. Well, there's the answer right there then.
For me,
the reason why I'm saying is because I would consider myself an expert in my field, but that's just because I've been doing it for so long. Whereas it sounds like, and I don't know some of the time frames associated with those jobs that you hit, but it sounds like you'd hit that for a little bit and then hit another thing and then hit another thing. So it gave you a broad scope. But I don't know, would you consider yourself an expert in any one of those things? Because I don't know how much time you spent there, or did it just come natural and you're just one of those people where you're like, whatever, man?
So I would consider myself an expert as an executive producer, as a head of production, as a builder as an entrepreneur on the production side. So by no means am I the best screenwriter. Can I write? Yes. By no means am I the best director. Can I direct? Yes. I just directed another short film that I'm really excited about that I think is pretty good. And I don't really direct commercials or anything like that. I'm not super creative. But I have kind of enough knowledge to be dangerous, and also enough knowledge to maybe provide a poke or a prod or a bad idea that leads to a good idea. The thing that I do feel like I'm an expert at, though, is building and scaling an efficient production model. And so that's true both from the output of the actual work itself. So it's the best, highest level creative, as dictated by the strategy required for whatever product it is that we're selling, as well as generating revenue. So the revenue model that we have here is the percentages would sound crazy, but what we've done over the course of the last 3 years, I was like, oh yeah, I figured out how to do this really, really well. And so I love doing that, because talk about supported and supporting. I look at myself as the supporting entity, and my, obviously the team that works for me, we're the supporting entity for everybody else to do the best possible job that they can do to provide the best strategy and the best creative. And then my team is just going to help bring it to life. And, my ego is no longer seated in I want to be the writer. I want to be the director. I want to be the creative. I want to be the person with the vision. It's like, nope, I'm cool being back here, pro supering this, making sure that the birds get in the air and they come back empty. That's the way I look at it.
You mean you want everybody to be successful instead of just, hey, my pride and it's me and I'm the creative director kind of thing?
Correct.
Got it.
So
that's a good place to be.
Yeah, I want to talk about the person that said that you weren't good for the job because you came from the military, from a certain background. How often did you run into that? And for the vets out there that are getting out and transitioning to the civilian world, how would we recommend that they overcome that? People's perception of what the military is like, because it sounds like the other people that loved you were like, oh well, you're not militant. Is that a surprise? And we've run into the same thing. I remember being in the office one time, and one of the civilians that was in there was like, you guys are all so nice. It was a super big surprise to her. And we're like, yeah, we're just people. Like, just because I've done XYZ doesn't mean that like I walk into an office job, kick in the door, and I want to shoot everybody in the face. Like, it's not how it works. So like for the people going through that transition process, like, and I'm sure you've talked to, through this with a few other people, like, how do you get past that? Like, when someone's like, oh, well, you were in the military, like, what's the best way to get over that and to like convince people that you are just a human being with like maybe a different set of skills and experiences that can be valuable?
I think it's a great question. I think the biggest thing that transitioning service members can do, or veterans that have already transitioned that might be running into this issue, is to slow down and look around and assess and look inward first and say, am I being what they're saying I'm being? Am I being too aggressive? Am I making assumptions about what I can do? Am I making assumptions about what I think they should be doing? And maybe I'm communicating it in a way that's a little too assertive and aggressive about what they're doing and what they could be doing differently. And just really slowing down and having some humility about the fact that you have a different set of frameworks that you can see this work through, and that you're going to need to, it's a cliche, but you're going to need to win the hearts and minds of the people that you're working with in order to let you use those frameworks. They're also going to feel some type of way because they're like, well, I didn't serve, I didn't deploy, I didn't do all of this, so I can't possibly see things the way that this person sees things. I can't possibly do things the way that they do things. What they did was special. It's like, no, not really. It's just a different framework, and it's just a different opportunity. And so here's the tough part. I finally got an email back from that guy after I had sent him like several emails being like, listen, man, I need to know, like, what can I actually do better? What can I actually do better? And he sent me this long thing, and it was like, it broke my heart. Like, I cried, I was pissed. I was like, kind of all that stuff. Now, several years later, I went back and read that email probably like a month ago, and I'm like, he was right. He was right. Like, there were things that I was doing that I should not have been doing, or I could have done better, could have communicated more clearly, could have communicated a little bit more soft, could have been a little bit more human about these things, instead of just being like, hey man, I've got the best work ethic in this office. I want to have that guy's role. I want to do it as fast as I can. What do you need from me, bro? Like, the spirit behind all those things that I was asking, awesome, super humble. The manner in which I communicated that, not humble at all. So I think like looking for ways that critiques or criticism might be valid, while still also like understanding where your heart is and like where you're coming from, and just making some adjustments, instead of just being like, oh man, they're right, I'm just a piece of shit, I guess I'm never going to make it. It's like, no, you just gotta just flex and adjust.
Well, they do say that flexibility is the key to air power, Carey. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. It's a little something we like to call excellence in all we do. Man, so that brings us full circle from the very beginning of you wanting to get in and answering that call in 2006 and trying to do the hardest possible thing and, learning lessons the entire way. And now, here we are with, Veteran Made Podcast. And everybody go out there and follow Veteran Made Podcast. You can find them on Instagram. What are your other socials, Carey?
Right now it's Instagram and Facebook at Veteran Made Pod on both. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'll post some content on LinkedIn from the podcast, but I use that as an opportunity to connect with my clients and potential clients on the agency side of things, just to kind of like, humanize the round out the experience. And then I'm getting ready to, I'm not sure when this will go live, but I am getting ready to start up a YouTube channel. So I'll be doing some YouTube shorts, and then some longer form docu-series style content, as well as some other kind of more like experimental, artsy fartsy type stuff, but still under the Veteran Made brand.
Well, we're all about it here, man. I'm so glad that we got to reconnect and we got to check, each other's projects out, so to speak, and see where you've been. And your story is amazing. We always end with advice, right? So we always ask, what would you give advice, to this specific group today? It feels right. Like anybody out there that's having these questions about, am I going to fit inside of the aspect work community? Does my personality jive with these, what my perceptions of the jobs are? What would be your advice to folks out there kind of having that issue? Like, what would you tell them coming from a guy with a crazy diverse background as yours and still finding a way to to take lessons and learn, from stuff going on. So what advice would you give to those folks?
My advice would be to be humble and stay humble, but that doesn't mean to be passive and to stay passive. It means to be assertive where you need to be assertive and be aggressive where you need to be aggressive, but all from a place of humility, and understand that you are going to find your fit wherever that is. And so if you're somebody that needs to go through the pipeline and make it onto a team and make it onto the teams and go serve, that's what's going to happen. If you're somebody that's not going to happen, then that's not going to happen, but you probably still need to go through the experiences that you feel like you need to go through. So, be humble, stay humble, but don't be passive.
Fantastic. Carey, can't say thanks enough. Everybody, make sure you're following Veteran Made Pod on all the platforms. They're not going to get a LinkedIn, but they're going to be super excited about that YouTube channel. So.
Look at that. What timing.
Yeah, the talks are like.
What a way to end.
Everybody else out there, follow us, onesready.com. I'm doing it over the dogs. I don't care. Follow us at onesready.com. You can find us on all the podcast players. We're out here. Shoot us a DM if you need anything. Carey, open invite. Anytime you want to come back on or anything else you want to talk about, you say the word and we'll get you on, man. You're awesome. I hope you're way more popular than us, way faster than we've ever been. So that's the goal. I hope you crush it. You got any teasers out there? You got anything coming on the horizon you might want to put out there?
Yes, I do. Well, first I just want to say, again, thanks for having me. I want to have y'all on mine as well. We should do a home and home, so to speak. And maybe do it individually so I can get to know the other two here a little bit better. Would love to hear about content creation while you're still in, especially at senior enlisted levels, which I think is really important for people to hear. And Aaron, I just want to say thanks for staying connected over the years. I did, for a long time, I had a lot of shame about not making it as a PJ, and it was really, really difficult for me to, frankly, for a long time, it was really difficult for me to watch content and see content that any sort of operator or PJs were a part of. But you've always been somebody that I've maintained, some sort of contact with, even if it wasn't as much as I wanted. Now that we're back in more consistent contact, I just want to thank you for your leadership in INDOC and then your friendship since. So thank you. So I've got a couple of awesome guests coming up. Not sure when this is going to go live, but I did have the opportunity to interview Jack Carr. And so his episode is going to go live on the day that his next book goes live, which is Tuesday, May 17th. Nice. Very, very excited about that particular episode. And then we've got a couple of others. Marty Skovland with Task and Purpose, where we talked about his transition from Coffee or Die and his relationship with those guys at Black Rifle, and then kind of going into Task and Purpose and repurposing what they're doing, which is really important for the entire military community. So pretty excited about those particular episodes, and there will be more coming.
Awesome, brother. Well, we'll be on the lookout. We'll get this turned. We don't know when it's going to drop either. That's the fun part about us. We all made the face when you're like, oh, senior enlisted in content creation. We're like, well, we're not very good at the content production. I'll tell you that much. That's the issue.
Well, awesome.
All right, brother. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time. For everybody else out there, train hard. We'll see you.